in today I think we're, we've gone a half hour, but I think maybe I could define like what we're doing today is like we're going through all this older 9/11 media and kind of ephemera that maybe we haven't gotten to before and kind of analyze it and see like, I don't know, like where we're at. And so like
we're rambling about 9/11, but
we're rambling about 9/11, but I mean,
to say, I think that what you say about like the economic importance of the towers, like, I think that even in like the most baseline, like mainstream, like official account of 9/11, like that was not irrelevant to like the motive of like the evil Muslims that did it. Like it wasn't just that they were pretty and iconic. It was that like they were iconic and symbolic of the United States economic power and of global capital, but they, also actually were practically like an economic hub and an important sort of fixture and command center for global and particularly finance in New York and the United States. So definitely that was a consideration, like in these attacks from like whatever angle you look at them. And I was just thinking like, relative to the filing cabinet thing, like they're also just kind of like Wicker Man type, like Inferno pyres. And they like, I don't know. It's just very odd. I almost feel like they must have been, when they were first built, just like lambasted for how ugly they are.
I actually found out the other day that it was a Japanese-American architect that was, ironically enough, beloved by the Saudi royal family. That actually, I think, had him come and build some gigantic buildings in Saudi Arabia. But
that makes sense to me because they remind me of like that kind of austere like architecture that would appeal to like the Saudis. They're very like, even if you look at the like buildings around them, like a lot of them are older and things like that, but they have like aesthetic elements. There are no aesthetic elements to this building. Even like arguably WTC 7, also pretty ugly. Yeah. But definitely has more aesthetic elements. There's a little bit of coloration, like the windows kind of shimmer. There's like a little bit of like kind of the only
flourish. And I noticed this watching a documentary the other day, and people have speculated about it. But that like on the lobby, the bottom of the World Trade Center, they have these kind of trident columns that kind of go up and then into three things. Now, I think people have pointed them out. One, for having almost a kind of Islamic architecture influence, and also that they represent the trident, which is actually like the weapon of the devil.
The pitchfork.
The pitchford, which is actually a trident. It's not a pitchfork. Pitchfork is a populist weapon.
Yes, I do remember reading. They're kind of those like pointed arches, which were like a very famous feature of kind of like Gothic architecture, but the reason they were kind of an import from the Islamic world. That's kind of what I've mentioned of them before. But yeah, they do kind of also look like upward pointed tridents.
Which is,
I'm looking at peeringthrough.blogspot.com. I've never seen this website before, but this just came up when I searched for WTC Trident. And yeah, there's someone has recovered like 2 of the tridents. They're all charred, and rescued WTC double tridents now reside in the 9/11 Memorial. 33, a nod to our Masonic heritage.
What? Wow. There's 33 of them that survived?
There's 2 of them.
So
3
3. Gotcha.
Yeah, 3.
Gotcha.
The logo also doubles as a W, which is said to stand for World Trade Center, as well as Westfield World Trade Shopping Center, set to open in 2015. Wow, I would also suggest that the letter W itself could be seen as a trident, and likely a tribute to then President George W. Bush, who I feel was complicit in the acts of 9/11/2001. Yeah, it was a tribute.
Dear God. Wow. Okay. Well, the other thing, last thing I'll say about filing cabinet is, I read Thomas Pynchon's Bleeding Edge this month, and I went on the Trillbillies to talk about it with Terrence and Jimmy Fallon Gong. And that, I feel like Pynchon, and I guess he wrote this in like 2013, he seems to be very up on almost every current of like 9/11 truth and kind of conspiracy theories in general. It's a big theme throughout his work, but his whole kind of thrust in that novel is tying like the 90s Silicon Alley .com boom, which like we talked about in our episode about Josh Harris, and the 9/11 attacks, and kind of trying to tie some kind of like thread between the two. And these are like two things that never really get associated, you know, even though they happened in short span with each other. But there's all kinds of hints in that, for example, the kind of Josh Harris-y villain in it, Gabriel Ice, is in the kind of the months leading up to 9/11, his company Hashslingers is just going around buying up like fiber optic cable and stuff. And like he's buying up kind of like the infrastructure capacity of the internet that's kind of been abandoned, just like, I don't know, like Vanderbilt or Gould, like after a railroad bust. Like he's buying up track line, you know, everywhere he can. And at first, it's even kind of this funny Elon Musk thing where like one of the characters kind of comments on like, yeah, he's like gone insane. This is such a wacky thing for him to be doing. Like, why is he even like the internet thing is like in a slump right now? Why would you be buying all this infrastructure, this fiber optic cable things? And another character like points out, well, I think they even make kind of like an allusion to like copper and like telecom kind of shit, and says something very like Gustavus Myers-y about how like, no, that's actually like the smart play. Those are the types of people that always win and like stay in the economy and don't get busted out. Like, and to the extent that we think he's being like a wacky eccentric, he's actually doing something very smart. And so he's like buying up kind of like the fiber optic real estate that has been busted out after the .com collapse. And then that made me think about the fiber optic cables like running to, I forget, it was like to New Jersey or across the Hudson River on 9/11, where like it just so happened that the Federal Reserve, either they were like testing out that system on 9/11. And so when the World Trade Center got knocked out, the Federal Reserve was like still online because it was running on like an off-site like data center, and with like state-of-the-art fiber optic cable, blah blah blah. So it seems like Pynchon's even making some kind of weird allusion to like this character who he repeatedly says is doing contracts with the NSA and the Pentagon and like the CIA, and is sending money through Hawala networks, which is like a, you know, I mean that I remember that being discussed before in the context around 9/11 of like how their money was flowing around. I mean, I assume you're familiar with Hawala, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like basic, you know, it's like this old school technology that's all based on interpersonal relationships and, you know, like sending money internationally without really any paper trail, and thus like no way to surveil it. And Pynchon seems quite obsessed with that as well. So I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, and also the thing that really jumps out of that novel is at one point the main character Maxine, who's an accountant, goes and talks to, she goes to this extremely waspy white shoe law firm, Hanover Fisk, and she talks with this waspy lawyer, Chandler Pratt, and she mentions that, I think because she's gotten a weird video in the mail that is like of these guys like with a Stinger missile on top of a building in New York, like rehearsing something. And so she feels like there's going to be some kind of terrorist attack. And so she asked Chandler Pratt about it. And he's like, oh, like, let me go make a phone call. And he kind of comes back and like basically like tells her, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Like whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And it's like basically the WASPs like know 9/11 is going to happen. Like she goes and checks in with the WASPs and they all know 9/11 is coming. And like they're just not going to say anything about it. Like it's basically, you know, it's like that's not the whole thrust of the book. But as far as anybody, because there's also like Israeli Mossad characters in it and all kinds of other people, and they he seems to lean more towards the idea that like the Israelis were aware that something was coming, and maybe to an extent even tried to warn the United States, but like the United States government did not want to listen to them. So that's why like that Israeli shipping company like abruptly broke their lease and like moved out of the World Trade Center like a week before 9/11, which of course gets spun into like bullshit about like all the Jews got phone calls in the morning and like, which is not true. Like Jewish people died, like probably a lot of Jewish people died in the World Trade Center. But there was an Israeli company that might have had ties to Mossad. It makes sense that, well, if the fucking Americans are not going to like stop this, then we're going to get our people the fuck out of the way. So I don't know. It's like, Pynchon is hinting at that connection between high finance and, which of course is like the Bush family is intimately tied into, and the 9/11 attacks. And then, the rollout of the internet subsequent to that, with its mass surveillance capability firmly baked in because of like the threat of terrorism. And it has led very directly to like the world we're living in now, actually in more ways than I would have even thought, because now we just had another 9/11 in January, and it's even more traumatic for some people than 9/11 itself.
Oh right, yes,
which is psychotic,
I saw some tweet about that, which is truly insane.
It's really insane.
Yeah.
If you're like me, I have not forgotten.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.
I hear people say we don't need this war. I say there's some things worth fighting for. What about our freedom and this piece of ground? We didn't get to keep them by backing down. They say we don't realize the mess we're getting in. Before you start your preaching, let me ask you this, my friend. Have you forgotten how it felt that day to see your homeland under fire and her people blown away? Have you forgotten when those towers fell? We had neighbors still inside, going through a living hell. And you say we shouldn't worry about Bin Laden. Have you forgotten? They took all the footage.